Sometimes it can be challenging to figure out how to use those jars sitting on your pantry shelf, but fear not, I've got you covered with 3 tasty creations today. Maybe you're brand new to preserving and you don't know where to start and what to use it with. Or maybe you are a canning pro and have these beautiful jars sitting on the shelf not being used. Join me as we explore the incredible possibilities. In this video, I'll be sharing 3 recipes that showcase the versatility of home canned goodies. We'll start with a super easy crock-pot dinner of sweet and sour meatballs using home canned strawberry, pineapple, tomatillo jam, all grown in my garden, topped with a mango slaw. It's the ultimate convenient dinner and it takes 15 minutes hands-on time. Then get ready to indulge in a comforting vegetarian chili with my home canned, homegrown beans. And finally, we'll dive into my take on a lemon and goat cheese pasta primavera using my homemade vegetable soup base. I think you're going to enjoy this and hopefully give you some inspiration. I pulled out some meatballs for our first recipe. I made these meatballs probably months ago. When I make my meatballs, all I do is I take a pound of ground beef, I add, I think it's like half a cup of panko or breadcrumbs or bread, 1 egg, mustard, ketchup, and then a bunch of seasonings, salt, pepper, oregano, all that stuff. And then I bake them at 400 for about 15 minutes. Now you can also use the frozen meatballs from the grocery store. I actually normally have those in the house, but I had some ground beef that we needed to get rid of, and so I made my own frozen meatballs. Now I have my pineapple tomatillo jam. This is made from strawberries and pineapple tomatillos, which is like a tropical tomato. But they're very, very sweet, and so I make it into a jam, and we don't eat jam a lot, so I love recipes where you can use jam in like a savory dish. So I'm combining the jam that we have here with sweet chili sauce. So you've got that sweet tangy flavor of the jam, and then you mix in with it a sweet and sour or spicy. I wouldn't really call this spicy because we eat it, so obviously it's not spicy, but the sweet chili sauce does kind of have that, you know, sour tangy taste. And you just pour that over the meatballs and put it into a crock pot. Now I'm only feeding 2 people, hence why I have such a tiny crock pot. I don't do a whole lot of crock pot cooking, but this is one of the recipes that I absolutely love, that you can just plug in, walk away, and dinner's ready. The other thing I'm doing once I put my meatballs in my crock pot is I'm going to make a slaw. Now, I normally just put these meatballs on top of rice, which is what we're going to do later, but I have this cabbage and it's just been sitting in the fridge and I'm like, it's going to go bad if we don't use it, so I'm going to make a slaw with it. Since I'm doing a sweet and sour meatball recipe, I wanted this slaw to have a sweet taste. So we're using the cabbage and then I'm using fruit. In this particular case, I'm using mango. I'm kind of sticking with that tropical theme. I've tried many ways to cut mangoes, and I wanted to try this way to see if it works, which is, I saw it on, on a Instagram reel or something where you kind of make these lines with your knife and then you take a spoon. Yeah, this does not work as easily as they make it look in those reels. They make it look like the spoon just slides right in the back of the skin, and as you can see here, I was struggling with that. Typically, the way that I like to cut and peel my mangoes is I actually take a peeler to them as if they were an apple and peel the skin off. But in this case, I ended up just kind of filleting it like you would a fish. So I dice up the mango and I add that in with my cabbage. The next thing I'm going to be adding is something just straight out of the garden, which I am now in love with, which is tomatillos. My plant has just started producing and I have been trying a bunch of different recipes to see where these tomatillos make sense. They look like tomatoes, their texture is like a tomato, but they're sweet. I always say they taste like kind of like a grape and an apple had a baby. That's what they remind me so much of. So I thought the crunchy texture would pair very, very well in a slaw, and it really, really did. These guys are going to be great in like a pico or a slaw. It turned out wonderful, I have to tell you. And it kind of pairs well with the mango, being as it's that sweet flavor profile. So I'm just dicing these up as small as the mango. And then we're going to add it to the mixture. Whenever you have a slaw, you're going to want to add some sort of acid, whether that's vinegar, lemon juice, or lime juice. Today I'm going to use lime juice. One of my favorite things to use in slaws is lime or lemon, but of course vinegar would work as well. I think an apple cider vinegar would be even more amazing with this particular recipe. I've added what's probably about a teaspoon or maybe a tablespoon of mayo because I just wanted to add a little bit of creaminess, but not overwhelming. I don't want it to be soupy. And for seasoning, I'm just adding salt and pepper, keeping it really simple. Now, I made the slaw early because slaw only gets better the longer it sits. So I'm going to put a top on this bowl and I'm going to stick it in the refrigerator. And when my meatballs are ready, my slaw should be very well incorporated at that point. So here we are towards the end of the day. This is a little bit of rice that I had. I make rice at the beginning of every week. I make about 2 cups of dried rice, which comes out to probably about 4 cups when you're done cooking it. I heated up the rice in the microwave. Brown rice and wild rice take about 45 minutes to cook. So I don't want to be doing this every single day. That's why I make it once a week at the beginning of the week. And then I put it in a container and then we microwave it throughout the week. I'm adding my meatballs on top, and now we're just going to add our slaw right on top of the meatballs. And I'm kind of making it into a bit of a side dish as well since I have so much. And there we have it. Sweet and sour meatballs on rice with a mango tomatillo slaw. It was really, really good. Next up for our canned goods meals is vegetarian chili. You can absolutely add meat to this recipe. It is a very easy recipe to incorporate the meat element. I had some plant-based beef in the freezer that hasn't been used in a little while. So I always take a look at what I have available to see what I can make. And that's one of the ways that we save money on our grocery bill, is to use our fridge and our pantry and our freezer to see what we have that's been in there for a minute that I can make meals out of, so that we don't have to buy things at the grocery store that we don't need. And so because we had these plant-based beef crumbles, I decided to go ahead and make a vegetarian chili, and I'm actually making this as a freezer meal. And it's an individual freezer meal, so I don't know about you guys, but when I get out in the garden and I'm working and I'm spending a lot of the time, doing stuff around the house or spending time in the garden, I come in and I find that I have not eaten all day long. And I'm very hungry at that point, and I don't want to go through this whole process of making some huge meal. So I reach for frozen meals, and in the past, those frozen meals were things that I bought at the grocery store. Let me pause for a second. I've chopped up some onion. That little cube piece there is my garlic that I preserved in oil in the freezer in little ice cube trays. And then I'm adding some sweet peppers and just a tiny bit of hot peppers. Now I can handle a little bit more spice than my husband can. Not much, but a little bit. And that's what these freezer meals are going to be for, is for me. So I'm adding a little bit of the spicy element. But like I was saying, I usually bought frozen meals, and number one, they just don't taste that good. And number two, they're just so packed with stuff, so much stuff you can't read the ingredients. And so much sodium. They're not the most healthy. I'm sure there's some out there that are pretty good. I like the Amy's meals. They're not too bad. But I decided, you know what? I keep buying these meals. Why don't I make some of my own? So every week when I make my rice at the beginning of the week, I make myself a freezer meal. And I package them individually. I maybe make 4 or 5 of these things and then stick them in the freezer, and I eat them all week long. So I'm going to take my peppers, my onions, and my hot peppers, and I'm going to saute them in a little bit of oil in this pot. I'm using a larger size pot. Oh, the garlic as well. I'm using a larger size pot because we're going to be adding a lot more things to this. Next up, we're going to chop up some tomatoes because I don't think that you can have a chili without having a lot of tomatoes in chili. I think it's a rule. or back to the stove, and I'm going to be adding the plant-based beef crumbles here now. Here they are. They're from Beyond. I'm not usually a big fan of the plant-based meats. To be honest, I don't think that they taste like meat, and they almost have like a chemical-y taste to them. But this particular brand of the crumbles actually has a pretty good taste to it. We're going to be adding some of my homemade chili powder here. Quite a bit, actually. But the crumbles normally don't have that weird taste, and the ingredients are a lot less than what I'm used to seeing on the Beyond Burgers or the Impossible Burgers. Next up, I'm adding some home canned beans. These were left over from another meal that we had. Then I'm adding some home canned beef broth. So we're using, so far, 2 canned goods in this recipe. We're going to put those tomatoes in our mixture, and then here's our 3rd canned good, which is tomato paste. I canned this last year and it was definitely a labor of love. Canning tomato paste is quite an endeavor. It takes a really, really long time of cooking down tomatoes to make tomato paste. I think in the future what I would do is actually dehydrate my tomatoes and make a tomato powder, which you can then make a paste by adding water. I think that's going to be my go-to in the future, because this was just very intense work to make the tomato paste. But I have some, so I got to get rid of it. We're going to start cooking some pasta, because I am going to make my meal into a chili mac meal. And here we're adding the rest of those beans that I mentioned earlier. It probably would have been a great idea for me to use some of that broth to cook the pasta in, but I didn't think about it at the time. I'm thinking about it now, of course. And adding broth as your water for making pasta really, really gives the pasta an amazing taste. So definitely do that in the future, and I definitely will as well. So I have my 3 containers here, and I'm going to add my pasta to it first. I like the Brilliance containers for freezer meals. I think they just freeze easier. The tops are like super secure, they stack really well in the freezer, and the food just generally doesn't get that freezer burn texture to it, which I like. Mine doesn't stay in the freezer very long, because like I said, I make these at the beginning of the week. Sometimes they'll go into the second week if I, am not having a super busy week and I don't end up needing them. But they don't stay in so long that freezer burn is really a concern. But I do like these Brilliance dishes for that purpose. So we're adding all of our vegetarian chili on top of our pasta. Now we're on to our 4th canned good. This is my salsa. So this is actually a sweet salsa. I'm not a fan of the sweet salsa, but I need to get it used. I need to get through these jars so that, I'm not being wasteful, but I don't think I'd ever make this recipe again, although I do have some friends that we gifted some to who like it, so I think I found recipients for the rest of these jars. After we've poured our salsa on top, I'm just going to top it with some grated cheese. This is mozzarella, but cheddar would be better. I just happen to have mozzarella today, so that's what I used. A lot of my recipes are using what I already have, and I really encourage you that when you're making your meals, use what you have. Don't be afraid to sub out cheddar for mozzarella or mozzarella for cheddar. Don't be afraid to sub elbow macaroni versus shells, or sub out beans for potatoes or sweet potatoes, or there's all kinds of substitutes that you can do based on what you have in your kitchen. So these guys are just going to go in the freezer, and those will be my meals for the rest of the week. Our last recipe today is going to be my take on a pasta primavera. Really, pasta primavera to me means pasta with vegetables. So we're going to start by chopping up some cherry tomatoes. Then I have a patty pan squash, one of my favorites. I love patty pan squash, especially in pasta dishes. So we're going to dice this up into thick pieces. I think the thick pieces are best when cooking squash, any kind of squash, not just the patty pan, because the squash can get mushy if overcooked, and I found like the bigger the pieces the squash are, the less likely they are to overcook. Little tip there. Here is our soup base. I call this a soup base because it has any kind of vegetable that I grew that season. So this was from last fall, and I grew tomatoes, carrots, onions, peppers. I think there might be celery in there as well. And I used the USDA's Your Choice soup recipe. I'll put that down in the description below. Basically, this means you basically fill your jar up halfway with the vegetables and then halfway with the broth. So the first thing I've done, let me pause for a second and go to the recipe. The first thing I've done is I've actually taken some of the broth from the soup base, and that is what I'm using as my liquid to cook my pasta. This is a penne type pasta. Because the canned soup base has a lot of different kinds of vegetables, including low acid vegetables like onions, celery, and carrots, I did pressure can this, and I think according to the instructions, I believe it's 90 minutes for quarts. So now we're sauteing our garlic and our squash. I have some frozen green beans from a harvest last spring, I believe it was. I need to get those used up. You see a pattern of behavior here of just using stuff up that I have available. We're going to put our quartered tomatoes in there as well, and we're going to let those tomatoes and those green beans cook for just a second. It's really just to get the green beans to release that liquid of being frozen and to soften a little bit. Once you've got that heat up to medium high, I'm going to pour some lemon juice in there. Now I'm going to reuse that broth yet again. I am pouring and straining out some of the pasta into the pot so that way I get that good broth from the soup base. And now I'm going to put in my frozen greens. These were actually, I believe they were broccoli greens from last spring. I'm going to take the rest of the contents of the soup base, which was all those vegetables we talked about, carrots, onions, peppers, tomatoes, celery. I think there's actually chicken in this particular soup base too. So all of that is going into the pot with the liquid from the soup as well as some of that lemon juice. I'm adding some milk. This is almond milk, but by all means, please use any kind of milk that you have. Look at the colors of this dish. I think it's just so beautiful with the greens and the yellows and the reds. And now you have like this cream sauce base. And just to add even a more crazy amount of flavor, I'm going to add crumbled goat cheese. If you've never had goat cheese, it has a very unique cheese flavor. It's probably one of my favorite cheeses. And I think like if you're into cheeses like blue cheese or gorgonzola, you probably like goat cheese. If you're not into those really strong cheeses, you might want to go for a mozzarella instead, or a provolone. I added some freeze-dried basil, and I'm just stirring everything together. Make sure to taste test it at this point. There is a lot of salt and pepper in my soup base to begin with, but I did add a lot of vegetables, and so I tasted it and it did need a little bit more salt and pepper. So taste as you go and layer in that salt and pepper, because that's really what's going to give it that good flavor. We've drained the rest of our pasta, and so now we're going to add that in to our vegetables. And now it's just time to plate. We're going to add the pasta and the vegetables, and then we're going to top it off with some of the sauce. I hope you enjoyed spending time with me in the kitchen today. I really had a great time with you guys. I hope that this gives you a little bit of ideas of out-of-the-box thinking of what to do with some of those canned good items. Or maybe if you're new to canning, it's giving you some ideas of the types of things you might want to can for quick meals like we've made today. All of these took me just under 10 minutes of hands-on time. So really quick and easy recipes. If you want to watch more of my videos between now and my next upload, I'll put those up now. Happy gardening and happy cooking, guys.